皆さん、こんにちは。Joanna です。In today's video, we will learn about the Japanese particles. If you don't know what the particles are, it's 100% normal that you don't know what the particles are, but basically, if you have been learning Japanese vocabulary but you don't have no idea how to use it, this is a video for you. Today we will see how to construct sentences with the particles, what the particles are, etc. This is basically a very simple guide, so I will keep it simple. I will keep it, let's say, a short video. But today we will be basically seeing all the, let's say, most basic or useful particles to know when you are starting to learn Japanese, and we will see a few examples and what they mean, etc. If you're liking my videos, don't forget to give myself a like so I know I'm doing great. And also don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That being said, let's go. First of all, what exactly are the particles? Because in English or in other languages, we don't have one concept that it's particle. Basically, I don't know if you ever seen Japanese written, but basically everything is together. We don't have any kind of separation between the words or anything, no spaces, everything is together. So how can we divide the words into the sentences and know exactly what those words are doing? So we have two ways in Japanese to, let's say, make sense out of that. We have the kanji, that basically the words are written in kanji, so the kanji helps us separate the words, and also the particles. But the particles, we don't use the particles not only to separate the words, we also use the particles to explain what that word is doing in a sentence. For example, if I say, 田中さんは、田中さんは2時に昼ご飯を食べます。Here we have three particles. So we have Tanaka-san wa. So that wa is telling us that we are talking about Tanaka. Then we have 2時に. That would be the time. So ni is expressing, okay, this is the time. It's indicating time. And then 昼ご飯を食べます. This o is basically explaining that the thing that Tanaka is eating is the lunch. So every particle has a use. The thing is, sometimes we will translate it in English, sometimes we will not translate it to English. One last thing that you need to keep in mind is that the particle goes after the word that we are, let's say, explaining, indicating, modifying, etc. As the example that I used before, I put wa after Tanaka, I put ni after the time, and I put wo after lunch. I know this can be very confusing right now because you have no idea about the particles, but just remember these 2 points about the particles, and then when we keep on learning more about the particles, all of this will make sense. But for now, keep in mind, we use them to indicate the use of the word, and we put it after the word that we are explaining. That being said, let's explain all the basic particles very, very quickly so you can make very beautiful notes and you can have everything very cool, explain it, and then try to make sentences by yourself. First particle. Actually, the first particle that we need to learn is actually also one pretty complicated, because then we have another particle that we need to use and we need to compare with it, and it can get a little bit confusing. But for now, let's learn particle wa in the most, let's say, basic way. So we use wa to indicate the topic of the sentence. Topic meaning what I am talking about in that sentence. For example, if I'm talking about Tanaka with the example that we did previously, I will say Tanaka-san wa. So I put wa because I will talk about Tanaka. If I'm talking about myself, I could say watashi wa. So watashi, me, then wa, because I'm talking about myself. If I'm talking about a cat, I would say neko wa. So I put wa after. If I'm talking about today, I would say kyo wa, and etc. Like this. Basically, I want to say, look, I will talk about this, and I put wa. So the person or the topic, and then wa. Second particle, particle wo. Particle wo is a little bit difficult to get because basically we use particle wo to indicate the direct object of the sentence. If you're confused by direct object, don't worry. When I was in high school, I never got to get that concept. I never quite understood it. I did understand it better when I started, when I started learning Japanese and I needed to know what it was, and then I'll also explain it as a teacher. But you don't really need to know the concept in order to use it well. What I do with my students is I usually, when they are starting, I tell my students, look, you put it before the verb. Most of the verbs will go with wo. If they don't go with wo, I will explain to you why they don't go with wo. But yes, it would be the direct object, meaning what I'm eating. I'm eating lunch. So that's why I put hiru gohan wo. So lunch wo, meaning what I'm eating is lunch, not another thing. Or for example, mizu o nomimasu. I drink water. So mizu o nomimasu. I put the wo because what I'm drinking is the water. So if you want to make a simple sentence with wa and wo, let's try it out. So let's say I would be watashi. Watch is mimasu. And then anime, I watch anime. Please pause the video, press stop, and try to make this sentence, let's say, constructed by yourself. Okay, I imagine you already pressed stop and everything and you did it. So the sentence would be watashi wa anime o mimasu. I watch anime. So watashi wa, I put wa because I am the one that's watching anime. And then anime o mimasu because what I'm watching is anime. So I put wo after anime because that's the thing that I'm watching. About the verbs always go at the end of the sentence, but I have another video where you can check everything out about the verbs, etc., the basics of, let's say, Japanese grammar. So I will leave it down in the description below so you can check it out if you feel a little bit confused about some, let's say, things. I have extra explanation, let's say. So we learned wa, we learned wo. Let's learn particle no. So particle no is a little bit confusing at the beginning when you're starting to learn Japanese, but eventually it becomes an easy particle. We can use no for two things, or at least this is the way that I explain it. So you can use it to say possessive, meaning this is my computer, this is Tanaka's house, etc. Or we could translate it in English to of, for example, book of Japanese or Japanese book, to make it, let's say, more simple. An example that I usually give is the Shingeki no Kyojin, Attack on Titan. So Shingeki no Kyojin, basically, they translate it as Attack on Titan, but it would be like Attack of the Titans or something. So basically, no. You will see it a lot in anime titles or manga titles. That being said, let's learn the first use that is more, let's say, easy one, and is to say possessive. So for example, if I want to say my cell phone, so basically I would say watashi no keitai. Watashi no keitai. So this means this is my cell phone. Water was mizu. So how do you think you could say my water? If you guessed watashi no mizu, that's right. And yeah, that's not much more about it. Let's say, for example, Tanaka's dog. Dog is inu. So, Tanaka-san no inu. But we can use no more than once. Let's imagine we want to say the name of Tanaka's dog. So, the name of Tanaka's dog. We need to go from the most, let's say, general to the more specific. So, the more general part of it would be Tanaka's dog. So yet again, we would say Tanaka-san no inu. And then what the name is of the dog. So we need to relate, let's say, name with dog, because the name is of the dog, not of Tanaka. So Tanaka-san no inu no namae. This way we would say the name of Tanaka's dog. This is just about practice, really. Just try to focus on the more general stuff. And let's go to the other use that I said we could translate it as of a few times. It's actually the same use, but with all the students that I had already, I noticed that it's easier for them to separate it into two. That's why. But it's basically more or less the same thing. For example, if I want to say Japanese book, I don't have one here to show you. But if I want to say Japanese book, I will say Nihongo no hon. So I need to relate that with no. The book is about or of Japanese, so that's why I use no. Nihongo no hon. This one sounds confusing, but usually all my students get it pretty fast. If you feel like you would want more examples and a more, let's say, deep explanation, just let me know in the comment section and I will make another video just about particle no. Moving on to the next particle, let's learn about particle ka. I already explained ka in another video. You can go and check that out. I will leave it also in the description below. But basically, ka is like a Japanese question mark that we both write and say. So I will put it at the end of any sentence. It can be the most simple sentence in the world or the most complicated question in the world. Basically, all questions finish with ka. So I just make a sentence. It's not like in English that we change the order or anything. No, I just put ka at the end and that's it. For example, if I said previously, 私は水を飲みます. I drink water. Let's say, 田中さんは水を飲みます. Tanaka drinks water. If I add ka at the end, I'm already asking, is Tanaka drinking water? 田中さんは水を飲みますか? And that's it. So we need to write ka every time we make a question, and we also need to say it. That's why you could have noticed that in some texts, there is no question mark. So it's not actually necessary in Japanese to write the question mark. They do use it, but it's not necessary because they have ka. Moving on to the next particle. The next particle is particle ni. Particle ni is a mess. A big mess because it has a lot of uses and you can use it in a lot of context. I actually, as a student, to be honest, I used it as the, let's say, joker of the particles. If I didn't know what to put, I put ni, and most of the times was correct because it has a lot of uses. I don't recommend you to do the same as I did when I was making sentences. Don't try to figure out why ni is there. But today we will see the two more basic, let's say, uses of ni, and then probably in the future we will talk about more uses of ni. Keep in mind, this is just a simple explanation of it and basic uses of ni. So we use ni as beginners. It has more uses, but in two ways. First one is to indicate the time. To be more specific, to indicate the hours. So if I want to say at 2 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, at 5:30, this at would be translated into Japanese, or let's say we would use it in Japanese as particle ni. So I would say the hour and then ni. For example, 1時に私は日本語の授業をします. I make Japanese classes at 1. 2時に昼ご飯を食べます. I eat lunch at 2 o'clock. Like that. So basically, if you need to use the hours with a more, let's say, complex sentence, you need to say at that time I do da 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 da. You would use particle ni. If you don't know the hours in Japanese, yet again, I have a video about that, so don't worry, just go to the video about the hours, and there I explain everything about how to say the hours in Japanese. The other use about particle ni is to indicate place. But this can get a little bit more complicated when I explain to you another particle, but yeah, so indicate place, meaning if I want to say I'm going to school is 学校, I would say 学校に行きます. I go to school. If I want to say I come to Tanaka's house, 田中さんの家に来ます. So I will use ni to say, to indicate place. This is where I'm going. This is where I am sitting. This is where I am leaving, let's say. So ni. But the problem is we have two other particles that are also related to place. Let's learn first particle de. So de will also go after a place. So restaurante, in the restaurant. In this case, we will usually translate it as en. And the difference between ni and de is a little bit thin and tricky. But basically, if I use de, I am implying that the action that I'm doing is in that place. So if I say, for example, this is an example that I give to my students to try to make it more, let's say, to emphasize the difference between those two. For example, if I say, 私は日本で旅行します. If I use, well, 日本 is Japan, and 旅行する、旅行します is to travel. So if I say, 私は日本で using particle で旅行します, this means I am traveling in Japan. So it could be perceived as you're traveling in Japan, meaning from Tokyo to Osaka in Japan. But if I say 私は日本に旅行します, you are traveling to Japan, let's say. This is not 100%, let's say, reliable, but it's a way that I feel you could understand better the difference when we use de and when we use ni. But yet again, the difference is kind of thin here. And then we also have particle e. Well, I pronounce it as e, but we write it as he. And about particle e means direction towards, let's say. So direction, movement, towards. The thing is, it's not that common to use it, not that natural. 私は学校へ行きます. Well, you could say it is how most of Japanese books teach it, but it's more natural to use ni. Ni is more used as e. When would I use e? When I want to emphasize direction, for example. I buy a train ticket, direction to Tokyo. Tokyo e no chiketo or 切符を買います. Tokyo e. So direction towards Tokyo. So I recommend you to use most of the time ni instead of e because ni is used more. Today we will do until here. Thank you so much for watching my video about particles. Yet again, this is a very simplified and very quick explanation about it. If you like to have more videos about it, if you like to have exercises to practice it, quizzes, a lot of stuff more, please remember that I have a Japanese subscription that you can subscribe in a link that I left in the description below, and you can check out my Japanese subscription and you can have a lot of exercises, videos, and stuff to practice the particles with me. Yet again, thank you so much for watching and see you in another video. またね、ありがとう。